I'm going to ask you each again to play the role of the Minister of Finance. John, if there was one area that you had to spend more money on, what would it be? And one area where you had to spend less money on, what would it be?
Well, I'd fire the advisor who told me I had one area and another. The job of a finance minister and the job of debt and the job of taxes is about balance. So yes, we are out of the recession. One tremendously important goal now is to get that deficit down again, get the government back into balance. We have to be in balance within 2 or 3 years. Why? Because we could have another recession down the road. And if we have another recession, then we have to have that fiscal capacity that these guys keep talking about to goose the economy again if we need to. But we can't do that if we're running deficits in good times. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but relatively speaking, these are good times. So get the deficit down. But then the question is how? And there you have to have a balance. You have to cut spending. Nobody has ever gotten out of economic trouble without cutting spending.
We can't grow our way out.
You cannot grow your way out only. But if you cut spending too much, you can do more harm than good. So you need to be careful about what you spend. Should you raise some taxes? You may have to. If balanced budgets are the first priority, you may have to raise taxes. But be careful, because all of this money that you're going to get in raising taxes is money that companies can't spend. Companies that are employing your parents who are going to be paying their salaries, and if they want to raise, that's where the raise is coming from. So again, as a finance minister, first priority, get the government back into the good books, but use a balanced approach in order to do it.
Scott?
Well, I'll take your question on directly. I think the role of government when it comes to budgets, two things. One, fix the problems you have, but also be smart enough to not create problems that you don't have yet but will down the road. We've got a major problem gunning down the tracks at us, and that is Aboriginals, and that is the social burden it's going to place. Fastest growing youth segment in our population, Aboriginal youth. Fastest rising costs of social burdens. Take a look at western cities, places like Regina and Edmonton. The issue of off-reserve Aboriginals. Low unemployment, no skills. This is a big challenge. We need to help and work with Aboriginal communities in order to foster growth. I would spend more there. In the 1990s, when we balanced the budget with all the draconian measures that John was talking about that we took, and I was there, the one area of spending that we left untouched, and we said it will continue to rise, was Aboriginal spending. I would do that. If I had a penny left over, I'd dump it into post-secondary education, because that is your surest way to grow in the future. And I do think in some circumstances you can not grow your whole way out of it, but you can help yourself a whole heck of a lot. In the 1990s, the late 1990s, showed us that if you can goose growth, a lot of sins get covered up fast.
John suggested to Kathleen that we can't grow ourselves out of deficit, but you alluded that governments do not have as much capacity to raise taxes as they probably should. Would you attack the deficit on the revenue side by trying to get more revenue, more taxation?
Well, one thing I'd like to mention is that actually my party does have the best record of balancing budgets. Just to that point, my colleague Tim earlier
How many times have you been in government federally?
On the provincial level, our budgets have been more balanced than yours consistently. In fact, the Liberals placed third, but enough for partisan politics. I would encourage, I'll get to your question in a second, Allan, but I would encourage actually to my colleagues to think about other kinds of deficits and debts that this government and our Canadians and families are facing. The environmental debt, the infrastructure deficit that we currently have in this country, all of these issues need to, in addition to the Aboriginal training and Aboriginal and social programs.
These are areas where we need investment.
These are, I would say, we have deficit in all of these areas. And if governments don't have a long-term vision and don't invest in these things, we will face problems in the future. Look at our energy grid, just for one example. To your question of if I was a finance minister, what would I tackle first? I would, in terms of the debt, I would actually bench it. I would bench it right now as a problem.
Bench it meaning you wouldn't have a goal.
I would want to. No, we want to pay it off in a normal way, but I wouldn't. What I would try to do right now is try to encourage private spending. The government has, as my colleagues have mentioned, done a lot of stimulus spending since 2008. Some of that has given money to corporations through a reduction in their corporate tax rate. Now I would encourage corporations to stop sitting on a lot of that money and also start spending it. And if they're not willing to do it, I would dedicate those corporate tax giveaways to smaller businesses that employ more Canadians. So like I mentioned earlier, the small business tax credit.
Well, I agree with John on managing the budget, paying down the debt, dealing with the deficit, but I think to the growth issue, I think I would look to pursue growth through the manners in which it's being pursued now, more diversified trade, and create an environment through the budget instrument to allow that to occur through regulatory means and the diminishment of them, and ensuring that funding existed there to pursue those particular instruments and opportunities, because I think diversifying our trade is key to our Canadian economy.
That's the end of our segment on debt and deficits.